Hello and welcome to another My Aspie Marriage video. In the last video I touched on phone calls and how that kind of rolls for us, and this time I thought I'd go into a little bit more detail because there's actually a story in there, and this is one of those videos of things I've tried. So I've got, I think, one video so far, maybe two, that I've tried in order to repair and fix and things like that. So a few years ago I was watching a YouTube channel by this man who had been dating an autistic woman, and I don't think the channel's there anymore. However, he talked about how his girlfriend was so quiet on the phone. Well, for him it was FaceTime. He worked away and he would call her while he was at work. And he was saying that she was so quiet that he would ask her a question and she would give a sort of non-committal, brief answer. How's your day? Good. What did you get up to? Nothing much. That kind of thing. She didn't kind of elaborate in her responses, and she never asked him anything back. And so one day he decided that he would call her up, say, hey, how's it going? And then sit there and see how long it would take for her to eventually ask him anything. Now, I don't know if he's exaggerating or not. I take him at his word. But he says he sat there for 45 minutes FaceTiming her and she said absolutely nothing. And I'm just thinking, wow, that's patience on his part, really. That's pretty full on. But it's very curious on her part that she just didn't speak at all. Anyway, that's not really how phone calls go for us, but I thought that was a really curious story. When I first met my partner, he was doing shift work. In fact, he has done shift work pretty much for the duration of our relationship, and it's been various different types of shift work. 2 days on, 2 nights, 2 days off, 1 week here, 1 week there, 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, that kind of thing. So he's pretty much always worked outside of the house and away from home. In the early days, that bothered me because, as you will know if you've watched my moving in together video, when I moved in with his place, he was really quiet, he barely spoke, he watched a whack ton of telly, and he didn't interact or communicate. And primarily a lot of that was because he was doing 12-14 hour shifts, he was super tired, and he just wanted to come home and unwind all of the time. And so I hated his shift work in the beginning. It was the bane of my existence. I thought if only he did Monday to Friday, I'd have him at night time and maybe he'd be normal and we would be able to talk. Maybe not. Nowadays, this shift work, I love it. I am so glad that he does shift work because it gives me time, respite, time to myself. I get to be myself. I get to relax and unwind and just be who I would be if he wasn't around. So while he's gone, it tends to be a situation where the children and I kind of live in this relatively peaceful and harmonious type of life. So, for example, if the dishwasher needs to be unloaded, I will knock on the door of one of my children and say, hey mate, can you unload the dishwasher when you're ready? In contrast, when hubby's home, he will stand in the kitchen and yell, who hasn't unloaded the dishwasher, why it hasn't been done, and get here and do the dishes, And it's wholly different from how I operate. I don't bark an order at them. I go and ask them respectfully to get it done. So that's one difference between the two of us from when he's away and when I'm at home minding the children. And so since this video is about phone calls, I'll tell you a little bit about how the phone calls go when he calls. So he sort of calls every 1 to 2 days, or at least he was back then. And for whatever reason, I'm just not sure exactly the whys and how fors. Perhaps you can enlighten me. But for whatever reason, he would ring up and rage over the phone. And sometimes I remember saying to him, have you had a bad day? And he'd go, I was fine until I called you. Nice. And so when he wasn't raging, he was being condescending, patronising, put down, fault-finding, critiquing, even like just how he was when he was home. He was still doing that, it's all you and you can't you right, you know. So he called from work and we'd have these harrowing phone conversations. I mean, they were so stressful. There were so many times I'd be on the phone and he'd be rambling on and I'd just be closing my eyes and trying to count to 10 and just being like, you know. And we had a lot of debates because he'd start and I'd try to defend myself and, you know, this kind of thing. So of course I'll give you a few examples. If one of the children has a mental health day, he'll call up and he'll be, you know, how was school for the children today? And if dare one of us say that somebody had a day off, that's it, right? So he's there talking on the phone to me, doing this thing like, why are you letting him have a day off? He shouldn't be having a day off. If he has too many days off, he's going to fail, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, dude. And so then I defend myself or the child's, you know, situation. Another thing is, there was one time one of my children had cut their head on a fire extinguisher. And so you do the whole hospital and the stitches and blah, 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 blah. It's a whole saga. Then you get home and you take some photos and upload it to Facebook because this is how life rolls, right? And it's during the day, so I'm not going to call my husband. There's nothing he can do. It's already happened. He's at work. He doesn't work close by. I don't need him to come home anyway. So I don't say anything to him because I would have told him that night when he called. But when he calls, he's instantly in attack mode. How come I have to find out this is going on Facebook, blah, 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 right? And I'm like, oh, dude. You know, like, damn. Just things like this. I put this post on Facebook once saying I did all these things, like I list all these things that I've done housework-wise, and then I say, shh, don't tell anyone. I want to maintain my appearance of laziness. And he gets on the phone to me that night and is just blasting through me because everybody knows that post is about him and why did I post it and how I've embarrassed him and you need to take it down. I'm saying to him, nobody knows what's going on inside our house. They can't possibly know that you're whom I'm referring to, or even what I'm referring to. Anyway, I take it down because, you know, it just saves a perpetual argument. And what else? There was one time he was talking on the phone to the children and he found out they'd ran out of socks, and evidently, according to the children, it was because I hadn't done any washing as opposed to them not actually putting their dirty clothes in the wash. He'll call me up to grumble about dinner not being the right dinner or things not being done. Did you get this thing done? No, you didn't. No, I didn't. Blah, 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 blah. And then he's kind of raging at me. Anyway, they're the examples. But the point of this video is to talk about how I handled the situation. So in the beginning, I would just try to reason my way out of it. Just try and calm him down, talk him down, reason my way out of it. Give him some sort of reasonable, logical answer that would make him just calm down and go, oh, okay then, no problem. And that wasn't working. And so he'd end up just raging at me on the phone, and in the end I started to hang up on him. As soon as he started yelling, I was like, dink, we're done here. And just leave it at that. And then he would call back and I'd be expecting maybe he's going to say, oh sorry, I shouldn't have been yelling, yada yada yada. No such luck. He would then start yelling some more. So again, dink, I hang up. And on the third time he rings, I don't answer. Then it started getting to a point where not only was I hanging up on him, I was refusing to answer the phone for the next 3 or so days. And even when we eventually talked 4 days later or whatever, he'd still be raging about it. He'd still want to have his 2 cents worth and get it out. And I'd be like, ugh, roll the eyes, here we go again. And then just either argue with him or hang up again. Then I started to take the phone off the hook for days on end when he was gone. Sometimes it would be right from the very moment he left so that he couldn't call until I was ready to talk. And sometimes it would be if he'd raged at me, I would just take the phone off the hook and leave it off in another week or so. But then I started to feel really bad because then he couldn't talk to the children, and I didn't want to be stopping him and the children from having conversations. They liked talking to him in those early days when they were younger, and so I didn't really want to stop that. So I didn't do that for very long. Then I started to do this thing where he would talk to the children, and then when they would pass the phone to me, I would just hang it up, not even bother to talk to him, because I couldn't be bothered with the fallout. Because sometimes the children would say something really innocent about how things were rolling at home, and it was never anything catastrophic. Like, the house hasn't burned down, I haven't, set the oven on fire or baked the microwave, made it explode, made the washing machine flood. It was never anything devastating. It was just a thing, just a small thing, and he would be going off, and I was like, this is just so unfun, it isn't funny, Then in the end, what I ended up doing, which I found worked amazingly, if only I'd known sooner, but who knew? I started pressing buttons on the phone. Now, the first time it happened, I didn't even think anything of it. He started rambling on, having shots at me, pointing out my failings and my faults and critiquing. I was never doing a good enough job looking after anybody or the house or whatever while he was gone. And so I just pressed a button, like number 8. Didn't matter which button. From my end, I could hear it going beep, and I didn't know if he could hear it too. But he stops, and then he goes, "What was that?" And I was like, yes, he can hear. Bonus. And so I said to him, that's me pressing the button, because I don't want to do this with you. Anytime he got patronising, condescending, aggro, started to insult me, I'd be there, beep, 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 just button, beep, 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 beep. Sometimes we like, streams of button pressing. And lo and behold, it worked. He started to get to a point where as soon as that button was pressed, he would stop talking and then go, "Oh, sorry," and then try to word it a different way or change the subject. So it was absolute bonus. Dream come true. These days, whenever he does it, I don't need to press the button anymore. I'll usually just go quiet and he'll realise, oops, I'm doing it again. And I have no issue with him raising topics. Like if he called me up and said, "Oh, so one of our children cut his head open. Wow, it was a bit surprising finding that out on Facebook. How come he didn't call me?" It would be a whole different ballgame. And by all means, raise an issue. But don't yell and berate and go through me like a dose of salts, because it's just completely unnecessary, rude and offensive. And as for the other stuff about critiquing and fault finding and trying to convince me that I was doing this goddamn awful job while he worked away, I would say to him all the time, like, you come back and the house is still standing and the kids are well fed and happy and everything is fine. I don't know why you're grumbling. And clearly you trust me enough to leave me in this position. So what is your problem? Just trying to get him to understand, just the end of the world has not come. This fear of yours or whatever, it hasn't even come to fruition. Just calm down, These days he is less aggro. In fact, I can't even recall the last time that he raged. I did press a button on him recently because he started having a shot at me. And even the other day we were talking about how one of the bikes, the children's bike tyres, has gone flat, and he starts asking me all these questions that I don't know answers to, and then starts condescendingly putting me down because I don't know the answers. And I've gone, I'm not doing this with you. And so he stops, So we have certainly gotten better from how it used to be, thank God. However, these days phone calls are perfunctory. And what that means is they're carried out with any real feeling, interest or effort. He has the same questions that he asks over and over and over again. how's your day, what did you get up to, what have you had for dinner, how are the kids going, did they go to school, blah 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 blah. It's the same questions, and then he'll tell me the same things about his day, and it's kind of a little bit torturous. I told one of the counsellors that I find the conversations boring, and she said to me that I was full of contempt, and I was like, okay, you try talking to this guy for 15 years where he's either having attacks at you, yelling at you, or just talk about perfunctory stuff. And I'll try to change the subject, make some jokes, try to flirt, ask him what he's wearing, try to change it up. Maybe talk about, did you hear about that shark attack or something, because I know he likes sharks and things like this. But it always just comes back to some just regular comment that he wants to talk about, some sort of boring life issue. Sometimes he'll ask me a question like, what did you do today? And I'll start giving him an answer, and then I'll wait, and he's gone quiet. And I'll say, are you still there? And he'll say, oh, sorry, I was on Facebook or searching the web. And I'm like, I'll say to him, do one or the other. Call me or search the web. Like, I don't mind you searching the web, good on you. But don't call me and search the web. Do one or the other. Or other times he'll ask me a question, like, what did you get up to today? And I might actually have something interesting to tell. Usually I don't. And this is probably the other reason why our phone calls are a little bit complicated, because there's not really much going on in the life of a housewife. Sometimes I'll tell him something really cool that's happened, big, huge, hoo-ha. And at the end of it, he'll go, oh, so nothing much happened then? And I'll say to him, were you even listening? And he'll say, yeah, So, okay, really? So I asked him in the early days, why do you ring? Do you ring because you miss me? And he said, no, I just ring because I want to find out what's going on. Like, is the house still standing and stuff like that. And then recently I asked him, why do you call me? I said, do you do it because you're bored? And he says, yeah, I've got nothing to do mostly, so I like to just call home for, for us to entertain him with our conversation. And I was like, it shows. I mentioned earlier how when he used to call the children, they really loved hearing from him. It's absolutely not that case anymore. I'll often see them on the phone talking to him, and they'll be pulling this really annoyed, upset, irritated face, and they'll just come up to me and pass the phone to me like, you deal with him, I don't want to talk to him. And I'll put the phone to my ear and he'll be yelling at them and telling them off, and I'm like, hello, it's me, and he'll stop. And I just think, poor child, having to deal with that, like, god damn. Or what's actually happening more often than not these days is when he calls and says, are the children free to talk to me? Sadly, they'll just say no. And I feel really bad for him because he works away, he doesn't have family and friends around him. It's probably fairly lonely. And yet when he calls, he makes it so hard for anybody to actually want to talk to him. Like, I wish he'd do things like talk to the children about the things that they're interested in, or find an interesting subject and then ring up and talk about it, or compliment us and tell us what a good job we're doing while he's gone, as opposed to getting on the phone and complaining and fault finding. So I feel bad for him on the one hand, and on the other hand I think, surely by now you're realising that this just isn't working for you. And these days we just talk less often. We space the phone calls out every 3 to 4 days sort of thing. So firstly, that gives us a little bit more to talk about because more time has passed. And it also gives us time to unwind, where we're not stressing about, say, the last phone call if it didn't go well and things like this. So that's how phone calls have gone for us. I know that this is not a particularly sort of common issue among Aspies, in that they're calling their partners up and reaming them over the phone. Again, I think, I don't know, I'm just one of the lucky ones. But I'm curious, of course, to know if you can relate to any of this. Do you find having conversations with your autistic partner really complicated? Are they quite hard? Do they not talk like that guy I spoke about at the start of the video? Or perhaps you've got an Aspie who just likes to talk about their own special interest for a really long time. Maybe that's how it rolls for you. Anyway, leave a comment below. I would love to hear from you. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video.